Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Nourished Child Podcast. It's your pediatric dietitian, Jill. Have you ever been worried about your child's self-esteem or their sense of self-efficacy? Well, I have a guest today who's going to tell us how we can help our kids build self-efficacy, improve their mental health, and so much more. They're going to do it through cooking. Yes, if you're like me and pretty much every other parent I talk to every week, the goal is to help our kids learn to cook, to get them in the kitchen. But sometimes it feels like it's just way too hard to make it happen. Well, after listening to my guest today, you are going to have a reframe around what it means to help your children cook and to learn the skill of cooking. Dr. Debbie Kennedy is my guest today. She is the CEO of Build Healthy Kids and Culinary Rehab. She's the Director of Culinary Medicine at Rouxbe, adjunct professor at the University of New England, and consultant in food is medicine. She's a PhD in nutritional biochemistry from Tufts University. She herself learned to cook at an early age. You will hear about her teaching her own children how to cook, and she ended up working her way up to the level of chef in Canada. I'm super happy to have her here on the show. You're in for a great episode. Take out your pen and paper, and she is going to walk us through the benefits, the psychological benefits of cooking. She's going to walk us through how it connects to self-esteem and self-efficacy. And she's going to teach us what kind of cooking kids can do and when, and so much more. Before we begin, if you are enjoying the Nourished Child podcast, can you do me a favor and go to the place where you listen to podcasts and give me a follow, rate, and review the show? It helps everyone who might be interested in childhood nutrition information and hearing what my guests have to say be able to find the show. Okay, that's it. Let's talk to Dr. Debbie Kennedy. Well, hello, Debbie. Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast.
Hi, Jill. I am so excited to be talking to you this morning.
We are, we just figured out that we have possibly some back connection way back when in the early years of my career in the Boston area. And you love to talk about culinary nutrition. And I'm wondering if you can share for our audience how you sort of came to this arena of nutrition and a little bit of your backstory about who you are and what you do.
Oh, absolutely. So, yes, I was in Boston doing my PhD at Tufts University. It was about children with leukemia and looking at their diet. And the top three sources of their diet was Coca-Cola, juice, and I forget what the third one was. Maybe it was milk, but it surprised me, even though I shouldn't have been surprised because this was back in the 90s, right? And I really wanted to help kiddos. So I started a program for kids with cancer at Babies and Children's, part of what was called New York Presbyterian. I don't even know what it's called now. It's been so many names. And really working with kids around their food choices when they were diagnosed with cancer. And but I was a chef before I went and got my PhD. And I personally had cancer, which was what led me into the cancer field. And I had firsthand knowledge of the immediacy of healthy food choices. And I went on to have two boys, which I wasn't supposed to be able to do after the chemo, but I have two boys. One was a great eater and one was a picky eater. And so he's neuroatypical, and I really dove into the whole picky eating world and wrote a book on picky eating, called The Picky Eating Solutions. And I set up a program for kids called Build Healthy Kids because I really appreciate how intense it is to be in a busy family. Both of you are working. You're not going to have all healthy eaters. We all come with our eating personalities, right?
Yeah.
Some of us tend to like healthy food when we're young and some don't. And so I created this modular approach. So I just asked families to focus on one thing at a time.
Hmm.
And I did a lot of research on that with Yale and Tufts and University of Connecticut, and found that if you ask families to just focus on one topic at a time, like let's just worry about fruit this month, or let's
Yeah.
just worry about vegetables this month, forget about everything else. And
Yeah.
they're able to make those positive changes. Well, we see knowledge, attitude, behavior, and BMI improving in all of that. So
Hmm.
that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah.
And now I am an expert in culinary medicine because I believe that it is essential for us to know how to cook.
Mm.
And starting from the young ones, research really shows that if you send kids off to college knowing how to cook, 10 years from there, they're going to have a healthier diet than those that don't know how to cook.
Yeah, I believe that. I'm the mother of four, and my
Mm.
kids have been, they're all out of the house now, grown and flown, and they all know how to cook. And it warms my heart to hear, what they're purchasing, what recipes they're trying, and they really do enjoy it. But I agree with you, starting at a young age is so important, right? And oftentimes I work with families still to this day, and a lot of times families will want to pursue this cooking uh, skill when their children are starting to enter middle school or even high school.
Mhm.
So let's talk about why it's so important to start at a young age.
Right. So when you have what's called self efficacy, even as a little tyke, when they know how to do something, they're like feathers, just fluff up, and they just feel so empowered of who they are. And when you have this self efficacy around cooking and your ability to cook, it translates into the food choices. It translates into making better food choices, eating more fruits and vegetables, eating less food prepared away from the home. It's about decreasing your soda and ultra processed foods. I wrote down this list because there are so many things. They're twice as likely to meet the recommendations of fruits and vegetable intake, better mental health, um, and connecting with others. And it really gives that really precious time of learning at your parents, your parents teaching you something in the kitchen and then sharing that meal. So they kind of go hand in hand, the cooking in the kitchen and the connection. Because to me, food is about your opportunities to connect or
Mhm.
disconnect, right?
Mhm.
And we can connect more. Kids learn about math and science and culture and agriculture and all this sort of thing when they are learning how to cook at a very, very young age.
Yeah.
And I do know a lot of parents are afraid, not even parents. I am always struck by how afraid people are of the knife, right?
Oh.
Even adults, when I'm trying to teach adults how to cook and I pull out a chef's knife, gosh, they think they like some almost pass out and they want to use that paring knife to cut carrots, which is very dangerous because you can't use a paring knife to cut hard vegetables. And with parents, I get it. Like, what's a safe age that kids can start learning how to cut, and when can I get them into the kitchen? And you can get them into the kitchen as soon as they can stand up and use both their hands. So toddlerhood, like between 18 and 30 months, right? You can
Mhm.
have them. I remember I have this picture. I should send it to you. What my second boy, Brian, you know those stools where you can just sit up, you can stand on them and they can access the sink. Well, he was washing broccoli, a head of broccoli, and he just went to eat it. He was not even 2 years of age yet, and he just
Mhm.
ate it like it was a lollipop. And for me, what kids are learning is that they have stranger danger. It's called neurophobia, not neurophobia. What's it called? I'm blanking on the word. Fear of new
Neophobia?
things.
Oh,
Thank you.
neophobia. Yeah.
Neophobia. And it's kind of like a broccoli is stranger danger, right? Fruits and vegetables, they don't know stranger danger. And if they can learn to touch it, smell it, lick it, play with it, bounce it, um,
Hmm.
it no longer is an unfamiliar item that shows up on their plate. So that
Correct.
I think is super, super important.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in your work, have you come across any statistics or data around the percentage of children that know how to cook who are participating in cooking? I'm just curious because we talk about this, how important it is all the time, and sometimes I wonder, you know, are these messages getting through? Our parents, our families, actually trying to help their kids cook? What do you know about that?
Yeah, I know that there's very little data on the frequency of cooking, the incidence of children cooking. I spent many hours researching that, and you see some data as little as 6% of teens to up to 16% of teens cooking, but that was just, one study. There really isn't, it's not part of the USDA's collection, right? They're really focusing on food insecurity. I believe that some of them, I mean, certain years they can add in different questions and cookings in there, but there is no what I consider strong, valid data to support. When you are asking the parents want their children to learn how to cook. The majority say that the majority of their kids don't even know how to boil an egg,
Mm,
right? So when you look at indirect data, it's showing that kids don't really know how to cook very well.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the health perspective around helping kids learn to cook. Like, what are the health benefits? What can parents expect to happen when their child learns how to cook?
Um, they are able to try new foods better.
Hmm.
So their variety in their diet expands, which is very important for health. You need a variety of food to both prevent and keep away any type of disease or chronic illness. So that's super important. Being able to cook means that they eat more fruits and vegetables.
Hmm.
Again, both because they're accustomed to it. Also, in a peer to peer situation, kids are like when you have, I love the aftercare programs. I think that's ideal for teaching kids how to cook to help the parent. I think there needs to be like it takes a village. I think
Yeah.
it does, even with teaching kids how to cook. I think parents, when you look at the barriers to teaching their kids how to cook, the time, the cost, the cleanup, all of that, being able to disperse that teaching to children amongst a variety of individuals will help there as well. So we have eating more fruits and vegetables, eating less ultra processed foods, which
Hmm.
is really, really important. The majority of foods that our kids are eating these days are ultra processed. And um, we all know that that does not lead towards a path towards health. Uh,
And when you say ultra processed, you're referring to foods that are highly processed and low nutrient,
yeah,
correct?
so
Yes.
they're considered energy dense, but not nutrient dense. So, like your chips and those, I was reading something just last night. The puffs, like, they even have the toddler puffs, and it really, really irritates me. And as soon as they put those in their mouth, they dissolve. And our bodies and our brains are used to our ability to chew, gives a message to the brain about satiety,
Hmm.
right? So the longer time food stays in your mouth, it sends a message to your brain that you're getting more and more full. But when you take that away, people, including kids, will just continue to eat and eat and eat because they're not getting that message to the brain.
Yeah, I did an episode on ultra processed foods with Julie Hess a year or two ago, and she's one of the NIH researchers on ultra processed foods. And one of her points was that, this term, ultra processed foods, really relates to processing. It
Yeah,
doesn't relate to nutrient content,
yeah,
which is very confusing for the public because infant formula is considered an ultra processed foods, but we know it is nutrient dense, it is nutrient rich, and children rely on it, babies rely on it. So I'm always trying to sort of make sure we suss out for the listeners that when we, as you said, when we're talking about ultra processed foods, we're talking about nutrient poor, hyper palatable, high fat, high sugar types of foods that have had a lot of processing, like potato chips, like candy, for example, like soda.
Yes, yes, exactly. And we also find benefits with cooking, like I said earlier, in terms of mental health. There's less depressive episodes when we're looking at mental health indicators, and just their ability to be able to eat enough of the healthy stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because there's always that balance, healthy stuff versus treats, and who's in charge there. And I think the more you allow kids, I always call it giving the illusion of being in charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting
Yes.
at an early age, would you like this or that? But both of them are healthy options, right? Or, we
Yeah.
go to the store, okay, you get to pick out your treat for the week. And, but you're always guiding from behind the scenes because,
Yeah.
as a parent, if you're too lenient or too authoritarian, you're not going to teach your kids what they need to know
Mm-hmm.
in the kitchen and at the table.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. You mentioned mental health,
Yes.
and we know that mental health concerns in children have really blossomed
Mm-hmm.
since the pandemic. And the CDC has stated that, anxiety and depression are up, several times fold. I think anxiety was, I don't know, 6 or 7%. Now it's 23 or 25% in children. It's really exploded. And so I'm curious about sort of what's the mechanism for cooking and improving mental health like depression or anxiety. What are you seeing in terms of what the literature is saying? Is it a calming effect? Is it what's happening?
Well, I think there's several things. There's one, you're connecting with your parent, and in today's busy world, you might not have one-on-one time with your mom, dad,
Mm-hmm.
moms, dads. And so there's that emotional connection there.
Mm-hmm.
There's also something to be said about having control over a part of your life. Well, COVID showed us that we had like little to no control, right? And that led to a fear-based environment. And to know that you can have control over what you prepare, I think that whole self-efficacy, I can't state that enough, that it makes your kids strong in who they are and in their abilities. And that in and of itself will improve mental health. And also, eating more fruits and vegetables will directly improve your mental health. You have the micronutrients that you need, maybe the omega-3 fats that you can get in when you cook from home. Your whole diet, even your protein intake improves. And so your ability to get the nutrients that you need to prevent mental health issues increases. So there's multifactorial reasons for that.
That's great. I think that's such an important area for children today, and looking at it and combining it with nutrition and food. And
Yes.
I think it has a lot of promise
Yes.
for families who might be worried that their children are becoming more anxious or a little more down in the dumps,
Right.
especially I think of certain populations like children who are growing up with larger bodies. We know they have a higher incidence of anxiety and depression. And then I think about, the picky eater who might be older, and oftentimes what I see are these children wanting to avoid the kitchen and avoid food. And so cooking can be sort of a pressure free way to expose them to food,
Yes.
right? Without making them have to taste it or
Right.
eat
No,
it.
that's you set up for success. Like the kitchen is a setup for success, right?
Right.
You're not asking them anything but to get their hands dirty. Well, some of them might not like that if they have sensory issues, but just go explore. And the quickness between, well, so those that are anxious and depressed tend to eat more foods that make them feel good, that get that release. We're talking sugar, salt, fat, right? We're talking the ultra processed foods. But if we teach them, okay, you have a craving for something because you're anxious, go into the kitchen and cook yourself something. And
Mm-hmm.
that expands the time between I need something, the impulse, I need something to solve my anxiety, right? Putting things in your mouth. Well, let me use my hands to make something. Let me distract myself. We know that as parents, you're going to be distracting yourself, and you get to go into your imaginative part of your brain
Mm-hmm.
and access parts of you that are positive, that make you feel better.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about developmental readiness to
Okay.
cook. And as you think, moms and dads out there, if you're listening, you
Mhm.
have a toddler who's going to have a very different skill set, cognitively, socially, emotionally, than if you're starting your middle schooler out with cooking, who's going to be at a very different developmental stage.
Right.
So help us understand how developmental milestones sort of can help guide this process of where to begin. What do I start with
Right.
based on development, and how can I progress?
Right. Yes. And one other aspect that is really important is your physical ability, like manual dexterity, for example. What can they do? Can they hold things in two hands? So when they're very young, we're looking more at the ability to hold something, hold a spoon, be able to stir, and all of that. So, but when kids are two, they can stand on their own by that time. They can scrub fruits and vegetables in the sink. They can dip foods. Oh, kids love to dip. But have them dip in hummus and some like really healthy food, right? Instead of, again, your sugar, salts, and sweet sauces. In the picky eating solution, I identify different types of eaters, and one's called the dipper. And the dipper is one that won't eat a vegetable or to save their life unless they can dip it in like ketchup or barbecue sauce, something that's really, really sweet. So, but kids can learn they can dip for you. They can even dip pieces of apple into like a little bit of chocolate. I mean, they can have a lot of fun there. They
Mm-hmm.
can wash and tear lettuce, and they'll let you know. And when they're in the kitchen, you need to have a very safe space for them, right? So, again, those stand. I don't even know what they're called. Those stand up. Uh,
Like a
that they can
standing
get
high
down.
chair type thing. Are
Yeah,
they like a where you can adjust the seat? It can be sat in or it could be stood in.
stood in, right? But
Yeah.
it has bars around them so they
Yes.
can't like fall out of it. Yeah, so that's really important. Or you sit them down in their high chair and you give them a bowl of water and help, just have them wash, not something small like a grape, because you don't want them putting that in their mouth, but wash something like an apple. And they're getting to know the apple, they're getting to feel the apple. And will you have water all over the place? Yeah, you will. Yeah, you will. And you'll have a lot of laughs along with it. Um, so that's for like a 2-year old. And when you get to be a 3-year old, you can have them pour things. So perhaps pouring the milk into a pancake batter. You can have them spreading whatever type of, like when they on a piece of toast, you can have them spread some uh, nut butter or some jam. And we're not talking about a knife, but a spreader, something that doesn't have sharp edges around it.
Mm-hmm.
They can knead dough. And they love those cookie cutters, and they can cut the cookie cutters. They can do that with their sandwich and have different shapes for their sandwich. And, you ask them to choose to make their own sandwich. So in Build Healthy Kids, I came up with this concept, which I've used for the last 30 plus years, and it's called Builda. So I teach all ages how to build a meal, build a snack. So if they're going to build a sandwich, they're going to have an option of what they want to put on it. You get to choose
Mm-hmm.
to make your own sandwich? Like like especially those roll-ups. Do you want a banana in there? Do you want an apple in there? What kind of nut butter? Do you want to sprinkle a couple of chocolate chips? And when you ask someone to build their own meal, you're not asking them to stick to a recipe, which requires additional money. You might not know the food. They'll end up throwing it out. But when you have these categories of when you build a soup, build a stew, build an omelet, whatever it is, you get to choose between the protein, the fruit, the vegetable, and the flavor elements. You get to honor a person's palate, cultural heritage, and their wallet.
Mm.
So that's super important. So, I would ask 3-year-old to start building something,
Mm-hmm.
and they can serve food, clear the table, and they just. I still remember it like it was yesterday, and my youngest is 16. The pride that comes over their faces when they're able to accomplish something. You must have seen that having
Oh,
4
yeah.
kids who know how to cook.
Oh, yeah. And, we got better and better. I got better and better, my husband too, about letting them do things younger and younger. I
Yes.
remember my son, who's my youngest, knew how to grill a steak in a cast iron pan at the age of 15 with, butter and garlic and rosemary and on the top of the stove and finish it in the oven, which he researched and taught himself because I had no clue how to cook in a cast iron pan.
That is,
And I felt so proud of that because I was like, this is like a chef skill
yes.
to be able to do this. And he just has always been very interested, but he was also that toddler who sat on the kitchen counter at the age of 2 and stirred the batter and
Yeah.
cracked the eggs. And
Love
it was just
cracking eggs.
very ritualistic,
Yes.
right? It was just like a Saturday morning ritual. It was like he'd come down in his jammies and my husband would sit him on the counter and off they would go making breakfast for everyone.
Oh, that's so cute.
But it is so rewarding.
It is so rewarding. And I have conversations at dinner with my kids, even when they were young, and saying, what do you taste in this?
Mm-hmm.
What does it taste like? And their ability to expand on the sophistication of the taste. And I'm like, wow, you're like a chef,
Yeah.
especially my younger one. He has the ability to name things in food. And as parents, we're like, wow, that is really cool. I never remember having the ability to do that, nor anyone asking me to do it. I might have been able to, but no one really was talking about that.
Yeah.
And there's this, public profile of cooking is really cool now.
I know.
Right?
And I was just going to add, in addition to the benefits, it just came to me, is you get these kids off their phones and
I was going to say that too.
you get them involved in a process that isn't instantaneous. There's you have to have your executive functioning skill of delayed gratification. You have to involve in the process. You have to wait and you have to see what emerges and sometimes there's frustration because things don't look like they're supposed to look, when you compare what you made to the picture
And there is life, and that is teaching resilience, right? And you'll
it's
try it again.
so true.
Yeah.
So true.
For sure. And as you ate, so we got to 3 years old, and 4 to 5, they
Mhm.
can peel some fruits and vegetables. They can juice citrus. They can mash. And this is when you can start with those kid-friendly knives
Yeah.
that won't cut them.
Mhm.
Um, and you can have them measuring dry ingredients and again cracking an egg when they're 4 or 5. Some adults can't even crack an egg well. So, and it's really important that you allow them the space to make those mistakes because that's how they learn.
Right.
You might get some eggshells in there and you might have had a busy day, and yeah.
Okay, so I just have to have a little confession here. I recently, over the holiday break, watched this movie, which I cannot, it was like A Day in Time or something like that. Anyways, the main female character was a chef, and she was all about cracking eggs the proper way, which is to crack them on the counter, like on a flat counter. I'm like, I have been doing it wrong for 58 years.
I don't
Always
see what
crack
is
it.
wrong. There's no
Crack it
wrong
on
way
the
to crack
side of
an
a
egg.
bowl. She kept going over, no, and she was teaching her daughter, you crack it on a counter, not on the side of the bowl. You don't get shells in when you get, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been doing it wrong forever. However, that's okay. There's no perfection in this, right?
No, and for a young kid, by the time they crack it on the counter, it's going on the counter. It's not getting in the bowl. So you have to
Yes.
teach them to get to that level. I don't crack them on the counter
Yeah.
because I've perfected my cracking it on the edge of a bowl without
Yeah.
getting anyway. There is
Yeah.
no one perfect way.
There you
It's
go.
an art.
There you go.
It's an art form. And then as children learn like mathematical skills, they can start to learn like a quarter of a cup versus a 3/4 of a cup. I actually have a list of what those look like for
Mm-hmm.
every age group. And if your readers want access to that,
Yeah, you can
I'd be
send me the
happy to send it
URL and
along.
yeah, you could send me the URL and we can send our guests to your website
Yeah, yeah.
to get it. That would be great. I'm
Yeah,
sure they
because
would love
I
that.
actually created this with the help of a speech pathologist. And for those of you out there, what is a speech pathologist doing? They're the ones that evaluate how a child can chew. Can they move the food around the mouth the right way? How they swallow. So they're the ones looking at that point of view. And then
Mhm.
an occupational therapist is the one who is the expert in manual dexterity and all of that. What can a child do? So you have a PhD nutritionist, a speech pathologist, and an occupational therapist creating this list. And it's 0 to 1, 1 to, well, not 0 to 1, but like 1 to 2, 2 to 3. And it goes through what it is you're looking for in your kid. You're looking for them to be able to, like, for example, be able to hold something in their hand or to be able to understand a fraction, to be able to read. And it goes through all those as the child gets older. And it's a great read, and stick it up on your fridge or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, no, that'll be great. I'm sure the listeners will
Yeah.
love to get their hands on that. So as you're progressing, just give me highlights after, from 6 to 18. What are sort of the highlights? What are parents, what should they be shooting for in terms of uh not giving too much for their child to do, but just
Right.
sort of the right amount based on where they are in their stage of development?
So 6 to 8, I would say they can help you prepare the food, right? So
Mhm.
that's, maybe putting together the salad, chopping some vegetables to go in there. By that age, I also would ask them their input on what recipe they want to try. And I'm saying that very specifically, because not what do you want to eat, because that's different than what recipe do you want to try. We're going to make a soup. Where do you want to go around the world? Do you want to try? Let's try an African soup, or let's try um, something, an Asian soup or something like that, right? And you ask them those type of questions, which won't automatically lead to I want hot dogs, mac and
Mm.
cheese,
Right.
and fish
No
nuggets.
open-ended questions. My listeners know. Don't ask your kid what they want to eat. You tell them
Yeah.
these are the options.
Again,
But
you create the boundaries, and they
yes,
become successful within that boundary. Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah, and that's
Okay,
what I teach
so
in the food world.
what about the preteen?
The preteen can actually make a meal, a preteen. So you like your 12, 13, no, that would be your 9, 10, 11. So your 9, 10, 11, they can make the salad for the night. They could do the dessert. They could do like a part of the meal,
Mhm.
and giving them ownership of bringing one of the dishes to the table, right? So
Mhm.
they own that dish from
Mhm.
concept to creation.
Mhm.
Doesn't have to be anything too too hard. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
telling you that they're going to make the grains, because that's going to take a teen to do, like,
Yeah.
manage grain cooking.
Mhm.
And then with your tweens, they can absolutely be making a meal
Mhm.
based on what they know how to do. By that time, you're going to be teaching safety skills as you go along. So, like, how to make
Mhm.
sure that you don't turn the heat on too high. I would say for the younger tweens, I'm not comfortable not being in the house when they're using the stove. But
Mhm.
once they become a teenager, then I would say more like 15, 16. I'm more okay with them using the stove. No matter what age you start them at, whether that's like 14, 15, or 16, it's not just the age, it's the experience too. So I want to see him cooking and knowing that he's not burning the food, he's not causing excess smoke in the house with that, not
Mhm.
and turning off the burner, that kind of thing. So you want
Mhm.
to make sure that you've seen that often enough that you build trust in your kids. And I say it's like any other type of parenting. Like, when is it time to leave your kid alone? Well, some states have rules in that, but you want to make sure you're already assessing, could I leave them? Do they know how to do this? Do they know how to do that, before you actually leave them at home? Instead of,
Mhm.
oh, they're 12, I can leave them at home alone, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I want to pepper you with a couple of questions because one of the things that comes up over my, couple of decades of working privately with families is this nervousness
Yes.
about the preteen wanting to bake. Parents get really, and especially if their child has a larger body
Mm.
or might be carrying some extra body fat, parents get very nervous about kids wanting to bake because they want to bake cookies and quick breads and cakes and brownies. What's your stance on that? I have my own thoughts about that, but I'm curious, as somebody who is working with kids all the time and really, has centralized your work around cooking with kids. What's your feeling about that?
Well, I'm going to go to the science first and kind of take a tangent from some of the data. So, for instance, if you refuse your child a certain type of food, they're going to want it more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I absolutely think that you can allow your child, even if they're in a larger body, to learn how to bake for the reasons of self-efficacy, proudness, accomplishment. And I also know that, I you can have it. For me, in the way I teach families, is there's room for a treat a day.
Mm-hmm.
And you can bake that treat once a week, and that's going to last you all week. And if it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, too bad, too sad kind of thing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and learning, so they're learning how to bake. I also would teach them how to bake. That's what I do with my culinary medicine practice. How do you bake with less sugar, salt, and fat? I just made an incredible zucchini bread. Like, it took two huge zucchini, and there was a lot of zucchini and walnuts and stuff. So teaching them one by one how to maybe replace one ingredient with another, so
Mm-hmm.
that they're learning how to make healthier food. And while they're learning how to make that healthier food, that hopefully that will translate into when they're out there buying these treats, though they might look for, oh, how much fat and salt and whatever. Like, you're teaching them,
Mm-hmm.
why are baked items not as healthy for you when you make them this way versus that way? Oh, the fiber is really important. I got to watch the sugar content and the fat. Is it a saturated fat? Is it not? So I would have those culinary competencies front and center
Mm-hmm.
while the teens and the tweens are learning how to bake. So if they want to bake their cookie for the week, that's the cookie for the week, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you teach them moderation um, and again, in the long term, preventing that, I think, does more damage than allowing them to do it. I think there's more benefits than there are harms. That would be my final answer.
Yeah, I agree. And I also will say that in what I have seen is that this tends to be a phase. It's like the initial, I'm interested in cooking and I want to cook, but what it really is baking. Um, and that is just a launch pad for cooking.
Yes.
And I always remind families that, this is actually very normal. In my experience, wanting to bake is just that your child has opened the door for you to help them develop, their skills around cooking. And baking is just that's their first interest because it's their favorite foods. And all kids love their sweets and their treats. I don't know many that don't. And so, of course, they might want to. And it also taps into that developmental, the curiosity and the wanting to be a little independent, to explore, to
Right.
try on some new, skills. To me, all four of my kids wanted to bake first, hands down. They all went through this whole middle school. I want to learn to make cookies. I want to make cookies. I want to make banana bread.
Yeah.
And eventually they knew how to do that. They felt comfortable with that. And they tried some other things, more cooking oriented.
Right.
So I don't have a problem with it either. And I 100% agree with you. We make baking a negative. That has far reaching consequences
Yeah.
that it's just not worth it.
No, it's not. No. And what a great way to learn a whole new skill that we went over all the research that shows that it does lead to healthier eating. But, we all want to do something we love to do first.
Mhm.
And that's the entryway. As you
Yeah.
said, it opens the door to culinary skill building.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say if a parent said, okay, I am on board. What a great episode. I am so jazzed up to start helping my kids learn how to cook. Where do I start? What's like an easy dish for my kids to start with?
Well, it will depend on the age. I would go revert back to the when they're younger, the build of something. So like build a yogurt bowl, build a granola bowl, get them measuring and mixing and adding things together first, um, before you actually cook something together. And then it
Mhm.
really is, it's culturally based. It is what is the food that is honored in your family.
Mhm.
And you could really have them, you can break down any of that into what part of this recipe can I give my kid to do? You can break it down so that you don't have to like go out and try something new, but also you can have them choose a recipe and cook it together.
Mhm.
So with the little ones, again, when you get this list, you'll see what parts they can do. There's a lot of resources in terms of recipes for kids and healthy recipes. um, I'll be coming out with, this um, pediatrics and culinary medicine in the next couple of months.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of resources that you can go to pick that up. But it all starts with knowing exactly where you can start with based on their age and their abilities.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Debbie, it's been so nice to talk to you. Where can my listeners find you, find your resources, get in touch with you?
Yeah. So if you go to drdebkennedy.com, that's DRDEB Kennedy.com, you'll find the books there and the cooking classes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to impart in terms of your wisdom to the audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I would just say take a deep breath. I will promise you this. When your kid's going off to college, you will never look back and go, I wish I didn't allow them in the kitchen. Oh, it was such a pain. It was time consuming and all of that. You will look back at those moments and they are going to be the moments that you will treasure for the rest of your life. I can make you that promise.
Oh, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Debbie. Appreciate your expertise and your time on the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
That's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this show. She's great. I enjoyed my conversation with her. Cooking is so important, and I honestly got better with every child I had in terms of helping them learn to cook, but also giving them the freedom to have some time in the kitchen cooking. So if you can make it happen, get some shared responsibility with your child around the tasks in the kitchen. Give them an opportunity to learn no matter their age. And eventually, I want you to give them some responsibility. Because guess what? You don't have to do it all. When you have a family, everybody pitches in. All right, I'll see you next time. But in the meantime, be sure to give that child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.